Hey folks, Randy Newberg here with another episode of Leupold's Hunt Talk Radio. Today I am at the Total Archery Challenge in Big Sky, Montana. You're going to hear some background noise because there's wind, there's people walking around, there's a band playing down at the center down there. So I apologize in advance if this isn't a perfectly clear podcast, but I really appreciate you joining us. Today I have a guest. He's been on the podcast before, but I wanted to talk to him now because he's been doing some cool stuff that is really into public land advocacy and sticking his neck way out there. And I'm interested to hear what his response, or what the response has been to him sticking his neck out there. This is Brian Call from the Gritty Bowman. And I guess an advance warning on this podcast. It is one of these podcasts that probably reflect the subtitle of our show called Randy Newberg Unfiltered. This is going to be very heavy into politics, very heavy into policy, and I hope when we're all done that people understand the point I'm trying to make and have been trying to make is that in the long run, this whole idea of politicizing public lands and access and hunting and conservation, it's something new in the last 10 to 12 years. It used to be a non-political issue. Both sides used to join in and it was easy to get stuff done, but that's changed like much has changed in our world. And this is Randy Newberg's theory. You'll hear the details of why I have this theory, but my theory is that until we make this painful enough, and what I mean when I say this, until the attacks on public land and conservation and access become painful enough to certain groups that they're not going to change their behavior. And I know some people are going to hear my thoughts on it, and they're going to say, Newberg, you've lost your mind. And that's fine. I'm a very, if you measured me on the political spectrum of America, I'd definitely be right of center. And the beauty is I have absolutely no concern for party affiliations. And my priorities in life are hunting, fishing, and public access. After my family and friends, that's what my vote is based on. And I understand some of you listening might have other issues that are higher priority, and you might disagree with some of the things I say or some of the conclusions I've drawn. And that's fine. The beauty of America is we all get to have our own priorities. But I guess even if we don't inflict enough pain and people continue to vote the way they do, I hope at a minimum anyone who votes for an anti-public land person or votes for somebody who is just silent when attacks happen on public land, because in a lot of instances silence is as much of an action as those who are attacking the public land. I hope you'll at least reach out to people you might be voting for and hammer them to support public lands, and hammer them especially when the crazies come out with positions that are against public lands. So anyhow, that's kind of the gist of what you're going to hear in this, or I hope that's what we're going to get to in this podcast. With Brian and I, you never know how many tangents there's going to be. But I'm going to go through and explain who are the wonderful sponsors of this podcast. And when I'm done, we're going to click the button, and Brian's going to join us. And we're sitting here in the beautiful sun of Big Sky in a beautiful, just amazing July day here in Montana. So, but without Leupold, whose booth we happen to be sitting under right now, in the shade, Brian and I are both big fans of Leupold products, and they're big fans of the public lands. They're big supporters of everything we do. I hope that you'll look really hard at any optics when you're in the market for optics. I hope that you'll make Leupold one of your finalists as you decide who it is you're going to purchase optics from, because they are out there supporting you in a big way. They're supporting all of us who appreciate public lands, hunting, and conservation. Orion Coolers, the next three, actually, just remember this, promo code RANDY, R-A-N-D-Y, and Orion Coolers, sitting on top of an Orion cooler right now, and you just aren't going to find a better cooler anywhere. I love them. I use them. I beat them up. You wouldn't know that I love them as bad as I abuse them, but they're an amazing cooler. Go to orioncoolers.com, use promo code RANDY, and get yourself this really cool tumbler as an added item when you make your purchase. GoHunt.com. You hear us do so much with GoHunt, especially when we're in our planning and research modes right now. So you hear us talk about it a lot, and I'm sure some of you are like, I wonder about that. And they have this service at GoHunt called the Insider. And the GoHunt Insider is this kind of behind the curtain sort of thing where you have access to all this stuff I talk about. Not just draw odds, but filtering of units you might be considering by harvest rates, by trophy potential, by how much public land versus how much private land versus what your draw odds. You want a research unit that has high draw odds, low draw odds. There's so much information in there. You get access to all of the strategy articles that they put together, which that in itself are worth the price of admission. But right now, you get a 30-day free trial. That's what they're doing right now. For those of you who are listening, you go to gohunt.com/Randy, R-A-N-D-Y, and sign up. You'll get a 30-day free trial to the whole thing. I mean, not just this little part or that little part. The whole works. So gohunt.com/Randy, get yourself 30-day trial, and I would bet when your 30-day trial is over, you're going to say, I need this. And then a lot of you know, because you've been watching on our YouTube channel, the e-scouting videos that we've been doing with OnX. And OnX has changed the way I apply for tags. It changed the way I hunt. It's just one of those remarkable resources. And to think that I have it all in the palm of my hand with my smartphone it's just amazing. I don't know how else to say it. But if you go to onxmaps.com and use promo code RANDY, you're going to get 20% off their app products. OnX, in addition to that, they are sponsoring this e-scouting for elk series that we're doing out on our YouTube channel. So I think by the time this podcast drops, I think we'll have released 5 or 6 out of the 12 or 13 videos of that series. So go to Randy Newberg Hunter out on the YouTube side. Hopefully you've already subscribed to our channel. If not, I hope you will. But if you go in and search YouTube and say Randy Newberg Hunter, our channel will come up. And you'll see, if you just type in the search bar e-scouting for elk, all those videos will pop up. And the folks at OnX are making this possible. And so far, the feedback has been tremendous. And I'm thankful for all of you who have been watching and giving us feedback on those videos. So, onxmaps.com, promo code RANDY, and save yourself 20%. So there you have it, folks. I already saved you a bunch of money today, right? Now, in about 10 seconds, Brian Call, I'm going to hit the switch, and Brian, sitting over here to my left, is going to be able to express his opinions. And they're very good because Brian has really, I would say, went way out in front. He's walked the plank, for lack of a better term, about public land issues. And Brian recently moved to Utah from Colorado. And the Utah Senator Mike Lee has, I think right around the 4th of July, maybe even the week after, launched a big attack on public lands. And Brian has been making calls to action of his audience. And I'm interested to see what feedback Brian's got and how much, quote unquote, love letters. Most of you'd call it hate mail, but in our industry, we call them love letters. He's got from people. So with that, Brian, here we go. Well, folks, I told you that I was going to have a guy who he is I've really come to admire how much he likes to kick the hornet's nest. In the last month, I'm trying to, I can't, Brian Call from the Gritty Bowman is who I'm talking about. Brian, in the last month, I don't know anyone who's been kicking that public land hornet's nest more than you have.
Yeah, well, I just moved to Utah about a month ago. And lo and behold, Utah is the breeding ground for, Republican, mostly Republican.
Conservative.
Congressmen and senators who are really pushing a transfer. They're pushing hard to have federally managed public lands transferred to the states.
Yeah.
And Senator Mike Lee from Utah, Republican Senator Mike Lee, came out and did a speech where he equated our current public land system to feudal England.
Right. Royalty type situation. And he did that. There's a outfit in Utah called the Sutherland Institute is where he gave that presentation.
Sounds right.
And then he brought forth what he called his Homestead Act.
Yes.
Which that's a really funky name to give to a bill that would get rid of federal ownership of public land.
When I first heard it and I read it, I was like, this is like Alice in Wonderland. Everything is so upside down from reality, so backwards, that I'm like, you have to know you're a liar.
Yeah.
You have to know you're a liar if you're spinning that. Like at first I'm like, oh, I want him to be this person who's just mistaken.
Yeah.
And after hearing the speech and stuff, I realized, no, he's a deceiver.
Right. No, it's
a deceiver. He's a liar. And at that point, and I don't know if your audience is probably aware of it, but we could talk a little bit about what he said.
Right. He came out in this presentation, and obviously I'm paraphrasing, but if people want to listen to it, you go to just Google Senator Mike Lee, Utah Sutherland Institute, public land or homestead, any of that. It's going to come up, and you can read and listen to it. And he really said that, these lands, these federal lands are a burden to us, and they are nothing more than the exclusive playground of the royalty. Is kind of the way he said it, which they like to say, the favorite line that they use that I hear the most out of these Utah politicians is, the federal government owns your land. Right.
They own your land, Randy. They own Utah. You're a Utahn, and 60% of it is owned by the federal government, and it belongs to you, not the federal government. They're hoarding it like the King of England, and that land should be yours, and it's a playground for themselves. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I go out on that land, thousands of acres every year, and I bike, hike, paddle, and hunt it. Yeah. You're telling me it's like the King of England? It's just ludicrous to say it like that. Right. And if you really think about it, that's a joke.
It is. And as kind of the gray hair of the old fart who's been in this game for, I don't know how many years, a long time. Every time it's like, let's pull the stake out and let's set it even further out there on the fringe. Every time they're staking out crazier and crazier positions so that it ends up as if they pull the stake back a little ways, it's like, oh, that's kind of reasonable. And not just in the positions they take, but in the rationale that they use. Like, you cannot. How can you take the public lands of America and spin that as some sort of royalty exclusive thing with a straight face?
But I put the message out there that, I try to blow the whistle a little bit or just give my take on what's being said.
Right.
And the pushback is pretty extreme. Yeah. Where hunters and even non-hunters that follow Gritty, they chime in and they say, I agree with him. The federal government should not own 60% of Utah. It's wrong. The government, the state, the local representatives should own the state, and they should be in charge of their own resources. And my response is, I agree. The state should be in charge of their own resources, and they should be allowed to manage their own resources. The thing is, that 60% of Utah is not theirs.
Not theirs, right.
It's collectively owned by all U.S. citizens. That's a total difference. They like to say something like, well, Texas is, we need to make the rest of the country like Texas because, God bless Texas. The government doesn't own Texas.
Uh-huh.
And the people own Texas. And I'm like, wait a minute. Don't say the people. The people is like the people of America. The people is not the same as people.
No.
There are people in Texas who own Texas.
Right.
Not individual people that have more money than you or I own Texas. But the people? No. But they say it like the people of Texas own Texas. And that part just that gets to me, and I feel like, okay, that's something I want people to understand, is that these public lands are in Utah. Let's say 60% of those lands, roughly, is what, as far as I can tell, 60% of it is federally managed public land. That 60% of Utah is owned by all Americans. Yep. And if you go and you put that into, first of all, if you go and you transfer that to state control,
state trust lands,
right, and you put it in the state's hands, it's no longer collectively owned by all Americans.
Nope.
It all goes to Utah.
Right.
Why should Utah get to have it?
Right.
It was never designed that way from the start.
No, it wasn't. And a lot of the interesting part is, if you look at the history, and I did a TEDx presentation.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I missed that.
Really? Oh,
that's awesome.
So if you got a YouTube connection, go and Google or YouTube search TEDx Randy Newberg Public Lands. And they only give you 9 minutes. And to tell this story in just 9 minutes is like, whew, I spent a lot of time sorting
Whittling
that out.
it down.
Yeah. So I said, all right, where are the places where the absolute truth exists, undeniable, and others try to make it a non-truth? And this public land idea has been an experiment that was started in 1802. The ground you and I are sitting on right here at the Total Archery Challenge in Big Sky, Montana, was the very first part of the experiment. And the guy who started the experiment was Thomas Jefferson. When he signed the Louisiana Purchase, the ground we're sitting on right here started the acquisition phase of acquiring public land in America. And it continued from him for almost another 60 years through war, through treaty, through purchase, whatever. I mean, you look at Alaska, it was a purchase. You look at the Gadsden treaties, all this stuff. So over the course of 60 years, the United States accumulated 1.8 billion acres.
Wow.
In this public land experiment.
Yep.
And so this TEDx, I talk about that. And then it changes from a public land acquisition phase to a public land distribution phase. And so the distribution phase is the homesteading.
Yep.
Almost 500 million acres went to homesteaders. The timber companies, the mining companies, the railroad companies. If you look at a map and you see all this checkerboard, the reason it's that way is they were given every other section if they'd come put in the railroad or whatever. You got that, and then you got statehood. Every western state that was admitted to the Union received millions of acres to hold and trust to fund their school systems.
Yep.
So when this whole distribution phase is over in the late 1800s, the 1.8 billion becomes 600 million. So we gave away 2/3 of what had been acquired. And the 2/3 that was left, everybody agreed it was not fit for commerce. It was too arid and dry for agriculture. Nobody wanted it. And about 1901, when McKinley gets shot in Buffalo, New York, he's got this crazy cowboy as his vice president, Theodore Roosevelt.
Yep.
Roosevelt, at that time, becomes president and says, you know what? You guys might think these 600 million acres is a pile of junk. It's not like he sat down and said this,
Yeah.
but through his beliefs, his administration, his conservation ethic, he said, I'm going to make something of this.
Yep.
And he put us down the path of what I call is the maintenance phase. In other words, we're going to make something of these, we're going to maintain it, we're going to keep it for all the people, and you can read volumes and Google search oodles of things where Roosevelt talks about these lands are for the people, for those yet unborn, for those in the womb of time, whatever you want to call it. So those are some undeniable facts that history just says this is how that happened. So these politicians, back to your point, Brenna, they like to say it this way or put it that way.
Yep.
They'll say, you need to give the land back to the states. It was never the state's land to
No, but
start
it really appeals to the entitlement generation.
Right.
The one that's like, yeah, and the government has stolen from me. Like,
Right.
I'm a victim, and these lands do belong to me, and I should have them back, and the government should never have taken them. They don't know their own history.
Right. So this whole process, to me, one of the failures we in the public land advocacy world have let happen over the last probably 50 years, we've not told these stories. And so when guys like you say, you know what, I got this big Gritty Bowman platform, I'm going to start telling these stories, and if someone gets pissed off, you know what, you're just going to have to get over it or die mad. I read some of the comments you get, and I'm sure you get some other comments that you don't publish, where it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. I mean, you're living in the Hornets. You're like at ground zero of it.
Yeah, it's you know, I know that when I go out and I engage in this conversation and I say, Senator Mike Lee is wrong, and this is why, and here's the truth, and here's the real history, and here are the potential, these are what I believe are his true motives for why he's doing what he's doing, and here are the long-term, this is the long-term disaster that will occur because of it. I throw it out there, and I know it's going to be like Jordan. I was hanging out with my friend Jordan Harbison from Mountain Ups, and it came up. I saw a BMAX post. I saw one you made, a few other people, and I was like, what? And I went and I read the speech, and then I watched it, and I was so mad that I just lit up the airways where I was at, just right off. And I knew that it was going to spark debate, and I'm just like, I don't want to deal with it. Like, I don't want to answer the comments. I don't want to answer the DMs. I don't want to do the email. But at the same time, I'm like, you have to fight for what you want and what you believe in.
Right.
And so it's just part of the job.
Yeah.
And so when I threw it out there, they come in and Jordan's like, we were somewhere for 2 days. New Zealand. We were traveling a lot, and I was like, just message. And he's like, for 2 straight days while we're supposed to be doing other things, I am trying to, and I learn a lot, and I get a lot of pushback, and it pushes me to go and learn more about the issues, and it is a lot of work.
Right.
But it helps me understand I'm wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like,
we all
oops,
can be,
I kind of screwed that up. But you learn as you go. And, but I feel like I love it when I get support, though.
Yeah.
Because when I say something like that, and then BMAC from Hush comes out and he says yes, and then you get on there and say something, and it really helps because I'm not doing it alone. But it would sure help if there were a lot of other people that got involved too in the hunting space.
Right.
Because I get a lot of really educated hunters that don't have a large platform, but nevertheless are very engaged, and they're part of BHA and other groups, and they actively. And so now, at least, my stage is big enough that when I do post something like that, I don't have to answer. I mean, 3 years ago, I got lit up by everyone. It's a green decoy. Run from BHA. Yeah. Now I get. I don't actually have to answer a lot of them because my the listeners and the people that follow get on there, and they answer with facts and figures and numbers and information, and it really takes the load off of me as we, as a group, try to educate people on the truth, the history, and where it might lead us if we go down this path of transferring.
Or just transferring, sell, impair, cut the budgets. Because one of the things that went under the radar while Lee was doing this is there's a Congressman Biggs from Tucson, Arizona. And this is just, I use this as an example of how insidious this effort is. So in the Department of Interior, which is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Bureau of Land Management, their budget was in the House this last week it goes through the appropriations process. This Congressman Biggs from Tucson, Arizona, submits 2 amendments to the bill that, if passed, would have defunded the acquisition accounts in BLM's budget and in Department of Interior's budget. Nobody really knew about it. So we end up with a few people finding out. How I found out, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation sent out an email blast saying, contact your congressman, because if this happens, we're going to lose millions of dollars that we've been fighting for to help with acquisitions for in-holdings, buy-in easements, things that solve these access issues. So the attacks, it's like they throw the big bomb out in the middle of the arena like Lee did. And then over around the periphery, you got things like
Sneaking
Biggs doing. And if I'm just thankful that there are a lot of people who are keeping their eye on things, their ear to the ground, like the Elk Foundation, BHA. There's all kinds of groups that are. But it's almost like there's a million ants crawling around out there who want to get rid of your land, and you got to try to kill every ant. They're just everywhere.
Yeah, I get a lot of people who write in, and they're really frustrated, and they're discouraged, and they say to me, you know, I feel like we're fighting a losing battle because this just happened and that just happened, and my response is, what else are you gonna do?
Yeah,
I mean, you fight. And you fight, and that's it. There's like, are you just gonna go, well, it's just too hard and quit? And no, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
So why bother whining about or fretting about how tough it is?
Yeah.
You just.
And I think one of the phases we're going through is platforms like you and us and a lot of us, you know, Steve and his crew and there's a lot of people talking about this, the born and raised guys. And now it used to be an out of sight, out of mind thing. It's always been going on, folks.
Right.
It's just that now there are platforms that are telling you
Randy,
about it
before
more.
you, I didn't know. Know.
Huh.
I just didn't know. You know, I hunted and I love public lands. I just sort of took them for granted that they were always going to be there. I didn't realize that we need to fight for them or that somebody was going to try to take them. So, you know, I got educated over time and started to learn how it all worked. And I think, you know, I look at that and I look at my audience, and the goal is for me is for them to 5 years from now go, yeah, well, I didn't know about this till I heard it from you. And as long as that cascade effect happens over time, we're making a difference. People are changing. And man, history and truth are powerful.
Oh yeah, that's what the other side fears. And for us, we are going our community of hunters and public land users are going through this phase of starting to learn what has really, this has been going on for 100 years. Yes, this is not a new battle. It ebbs and flows, but there have been efforts to get rid of the public lands of America since we started these public lands. So for those who kind of get frustrated, like you were saying, they almost want to give up, this has just been part of what it has required to keep these public lands intact.
Well, I was telling you offline that I've been reading the book Wilderness Warrior about Theodore Roosevelt.
Right.
in
by
this
Brinkley.
concert.
Everybody should go on Amazon and buy that. It's a heavy read, but it's very good.
And I got it on Audible, and I've been listening to it. I listen at 1.5 and 1.25 speed because the guy reads too slow.
He's like me.
It makes it more. I can, for some reason, when he's reading fast, it's a better read. It's not so boring. But I feel like I've learned a lot just in a short couple weeks listening to the book, taking notes, and I'll cover it on a future podcast because I realize there's a lot of people who want to know this stuff, but they're busy, and the idea of reading that book and slogging through it is a lot. And if I can distill it down to something that they can consume, I like doing that anyway. Yeah. But after following along, you realize that Theodore Roosevelt was ridiculed by his peers.
Yeah.
Made fun of in so many ways. And he's like, he didn't care.
No.
He's like, you guys can make fun all you want. You can be pretentious, political leaders over here in the Capitol. But out here, these animals matter. And I'm going to make sure they're here for the future. And he stood by and fought for that belief with everything that he had. And he didn't care what people said. No. So that does help to read that for me and go, who cares what people say?
Yeah.
Just you fight the fight, Yeah.
I mean, think about the price that Roosevelt paid. He got kicked out of his own party.
Yeah.
He had to go start his own political party because his ideas were considered to be so offensive to his quote-unquote party. Mm-hmm. But you look at it now. Whose face is on Rushmore?
I know. I think about that all the time.
Those people.
And as I was reading more about him, because Shane Mahoney said this too, and I picked it up from him, and now I'm confirming it from other sources. But this idea that Theodore Roosevelt, I don't know, like his face is on Mount Rushmore, but at the time he wasn't. It was something like people recognized his value later.
You're right.
Oh,
yeah.
But there were certainly, he did command the love of people.
Yep.
And that's powerful. And he did it through this idea of helping Americans, value animal life and wilderness. Yep. Like he instilled in that he somehow, and other writers of the time, were going out and they were writing about nature and how it's disappearing. Yep. And awakening in the American people,
right?
This love of wild things and the responsibility to keep it alive and well. So he started with I think what's a basic human DNA thing in every single one of us, that deep down we all know that nature is everything. Yeah. That we're part of the land and the soil and everything like all the other animals. And that but by distancing ourselves from it, we don't realize that. And it's like, what I want to do is help reconnect people to that. Like get them to think about the animals, right? Yep. So let's start there, because that's what Theodore Roosevelt did. He started with, saving wilderness and animals. And then he linked that to what it means to be an American.
Right.
He made it a patriotic aspect of being a U.S. citizen is we care about wildlife and wild places and nature. That's what it means to be American. And to tie those two together, so there's this nationalistic, patriotic attitude toward the wild. We've kind of lost that, I feel. I feel like we kind of lost that sense of patriotism toward wild places and Yellowstone Park and things like that. That's what it means to be American. And I feel like we've lost touch with the importance of animals, because I get these messages from people saying, I just think it's fine if it's all privatized.
Right.
It's part of the American dream to own land, improve it and develop it and make it into something. That right there is 100% American. And you're telling me that we're going to leave 600 million acres untouched and unimproved, and we're going to do that. You're telling me we're going to do that? And to me, they're like, that's just socialism.
Right. Oh, you'll hear that all the time.
And I was reading Theodore was called a socialist a lot for similar things. And so I started to learn more about that. And I feel like, and this is why I did the podcast recently by Luther. He wrote, Luther Standing Bear, Lakota Indian, wrote a book called Land of the Spotted Eagle. And in there, he contrasted his people's view of wildlife and nature to that of the European who came and just decimated his everything.
Yep.
And it made me think, when I first read it, I was like 21, 22 years old. And I didn't realize animals were on the verge of extinction like that, or that our planet was, like the forests were denuded of trees and like it was so far gone. I didn't know all that. And so, and then when I realized, that how close we came to like losing buffalo and everything else.
So many things. And
how heartbreaking it was for the Native American to stand by and see from their point of view.
Right.
And he talks about losing the Black Hills, and all the buffalo are gone, and the Black Hills are gone, all the trees are gone, and the waters, everything's gone, because the white man that came, he wanted the gold.
Right.
And the Indian wanted the pristine forest and wilderness, and it boils down to one thing: what is value?
Right.
What do you value? And if we're a society and a country and a people who values gold and what it can buy, then we're lost.
Yeah, we're that's that's not the path that has defined the Roosevelt conservation ethic that has got us here.
And I'm all about my iPhone. Okay, I like my video cameras.
Yeah.
I like my car. I like. So I was thinking about this the other day, and I was just wondering, because when someone says, if we privatize everything, and it's completely privatized, what's so wrong with that? And I think back to Dan Flores' book, Coyote America and American Serengeti, there are animals who win the lottery, insect species, whatever, among civilized, in civilized locations in cities. And then there's animals that lose.
For sure.
And if you privatize everything, so it's like Texas or Pennsylvania, those animals that lose because of civilization, they will be gone.
Forever.
Yeah. And so what percentage of this country, then, should we carve up and say, okay, this much is for those animals that lose when civilization moves in? What percentage should it be? Should it be 1 out of every 10 acres? Should it be 2 out of every 10 acres? Should it be 5? Like, how much is fair and what should we give up? Because to me, at some point, we have a duty to give up some of it and just say, that's nature. And those animals deserve to live and thrive. That means human beings can't, inhabit it and build cities and roads and all of this, right?
Yeah.
And I look at our public land system, and from what I could gather, it looks to me like there's 2.3 billion acres that make up the United States.
Yep.
Roughly. 600 million of that is public lands, roughly.
Yep.
That's about 25%.
Yeah, and some people say, oh, it's 70%. Well, no, it's 70% if you only want to measure it in a smaller, this area or this western state or whatever.
And I read that too, and I looked at it, and I'm like, well, if you want to say it's 70%, they were including water under the ocean and stuff. And I'm like, well, really, are we going to argue about that? Because we're not building cities there.
Right.
This is really a discussion about where someone wants to put their condo.
Yeah.
And so to me, 25%, Randy, is less than fair to wild places and wild animals. So can we not just leave that alone?
Yeah. So I've been in some hearing and reading some of the comments you get, Brian, is like
deja vu.
Yeah. And so I've kind of gotten good at compartmentalizing some of those comments, and sometimes I'm a smart ass when people, they think that guys like you and I are just supposed to sit there and take it. Like, oh, well, they're afraid because their sponsor will get mad. Well, we're sitting right here under the Leupold booth at the Total Archery Challenge. And Leupold tells me, Randy, get your ass out there and fight for this stuff.
Yeah.
So if someone doesn't like my message, if you want to call the folks at Leupold, go right ahead, because They're the
They're
ones
on board.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So a lot of these people, I just push back and say, okay. Like with some of them are like, well, we need to have a no net gain in public land. I'm like, all right, how about a no net loss? Let's have a truce then. You agree with no net gain, I agree with no net loss. We'll draw the lines down.
Yeah.
You call your crazies and tell them, hey,
no more.
And then it's like, wow, they get into all these other arguments. And one thing I have found is that I've lost any worry about pissing people off. I have zero concern if somebody's pissed off when I'm advocating for public lands, for conservation. Because if they're pissed off, that tells me they're asking me to rearrange my priorities to agree with what their priorities are. Whatever their priorities are, that's fine. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's just your life experiences has you at that level, that priority, 1 through 20.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I'm going to change my priorities, because my priority is hunting, fishing, public land, public access, and all these things. And there's going to be times we're going to be mad. And a lot of people can't handle that. They just come off the rails. And I've got to the point now where I'm not that worried about those people. They're the kind of people who don't want to have a discussion about it. They don't want to talk about facts. They just say, when you talk about this, it gets me outside the comfort zone of where my priorities are, and I'm going to rail on you. You know what? Go waste the keystrokes. And the other thing it does, and this gets back to a comment you made earlier about, we in the outdoor media world could be doing more. We could be sticking our neck out further. One thing I have found is that when I stick my neck out, when I say something, a lot of people are like, thank you. Or, you know what? That's the message I wanted to hear. Thanks for doing it. And I think there's way more people out there who, if they're given the facts and they see that people are willing to take some risk and advocate for public lands, they're behind you.
Yeah.
I think all of us have a tendency that if there's 99 good comments of support and one comment of criticism, we tend to focus on the one comment. I know I do.
We do.
And it's taken me a long time, but I'm kind of over that.
Thankfully, I'm getting there too. Like I really feel like I've sort of turned a corner in the last 6 months where the skin is just thicker. Yeah. And I'm not saying I'm right. Like, I'm open to the fact that I'm pretty wrong a lot, right? Like, I try.
We all are.
But that doesn't mean I'm not right about a lot of these other things that I try to be informed on.
Yeah.
And but right or wrong, my heart is, I know, like, it's in that spot that means the best, that means well, that's trying to make a difference, that's positive. And so I'm okay with the hate that comes.
Yeah.
It's okay. But we were in Snowbird at the Total Archery Challenge last weekend, and we were shooting bows up there, and Senator Mike Lee he's talking about his Homestead Act.
He's from Utah.
And he's from Utah, and he's pushing all this. So we got together at the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers after party at the Total Archery Challenge there. And then we all got some cards together that were Keep It Public postcards. And we asked everyone at the party to fill that out, a message. And then we're hand delivering those cards to Senator Mike Lee. We made some videos where we recorded, like, what people think about public lands or how they've impacted them. And I spoke at the event for just a couple of minutes and just talked about the issues with Mike Lee. And there are a lot of people that are just sort of that are in the hunting space and in our peers that are just sort of getting their toes wet for the first time in it.
Yep.
And there are others who are like, have made a decision that they're not going to get political at all. And so they're like, I love what you're doing, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I think it's weak.
Yeah,
I think it's weak. It pisses me off. I'm like, throw some balls, get in the ring, and do your thing. Like, support it. Like, if you don't know the issues, figure them out.
None of us
take your time.
None of us were born with this knowledge about the public land story.
No.
We had to read and listen and talk and make a few mistakes and learn from those mistakes.
I heard Ranella give a talk, I don't know, it was like 3 years ago at BHA. He was a speaker there. And he talked about how for years and years and years, he just took and took and took from our public land system and from hunting and never gave back, really. It was a one-way deal. And now he's gotten older and he understands more about it, and he feels an obligation and a duty and a responsibility to give back.
Yeah.
And now he's actively engaged in doing that. And I certainly think that comes with age and maturity.
It does, for sure. I mean, I'm like the old gray-haired part of all of us. And I would say that I wouldn't have been willing, or I probably would have been willing, but I wouldn't have understood the dynamics of the political and other parts of the landscape well enough to have been very effective until I read and I volunteered. I served on so many councils about public lands and conservation that was a big investment I made in myself. But before that, man, I was like, I was almost afraid to speak about things because I knew there was a lot I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I knew there was a lot that I didn't know, and I didn't want to go out there and make a fool of myself.
I get that, because when someone wrote a letter, someone very educated, he's an attorney, lots of schooling, smart, hunter, really great guy, from what I can tell, very, very intellectual, and he challenged me on my stance based on socialism and some other things, and he wrote a very long blog with a thesis statement and well thought out, and quotes from different people from all over in the hunting space that have been pro public land, and then brought forward his thesis and kind of fleshed it out. And there's a lot there, and if you're not somewhat like familiar, or you could be over your head pretty quick.
Yeah.
So I understand people being reluctant to get involved.
Yeah.
But I took the things that he brought forward, and I started learning about them, taking the time to research them. And I'm in a position right now where I have some time. That's what I do.
Right.
So I don't just hunt. I try to create a podcast that educates people and betters their lives and is good for the future of our country. And so I'm diving in, and I hope that you and I and others like us, though, as we create a product that is what it is, that people learn these things, and that they but the socialism thing, Randy, where's your stance on that?
Yeah, it's just bullshit. You know what? Every time, from the day a group of people decided to live together, whether it was in a tribe, whether it was in a local village, whether it was whatever, there have been aspects of quote-unquote socialism.
Well, let's define socialism.
Right, exactly. They want to use it as this terrible, bad, ridiculous kind of... If you use that term, you're not using it complimentary or with an open mind.
Right.
I don't have an argument. I can't rebut your facts, so I'm going to start hanging a tag on you. And the tag that works
Group
today,
identity.
Yeah, exactly. So if I can make you something that I don't like and others won't like, I win. And I'm over that. I'm like, go,
I think
knock yourself out.
I think this guy's genuinely trying to understand. And but I feel like, whoa, some people are so smart, they're too smart. Because I'm like, for me, on this socialism issue, I read a bunch of quotes from Theodore Roosevelt. When you talk socialism in general, the way that most people look at it is Marxist. Yeah. It's this take from the rich and redistribute to the poor.
Right.
And one of the comments was, well, Brian, what's happening here is you're telling me that the government needs to own all this public land so they can keep it from the rich and redistribute to the poor. And I was really shocked by that assessment because first of all, the government doesn't own it.
Right.
When you say the government owns public land, you're saying it's like the King of England.
Right.
But it's not. It's collectively owned by all Americans, which is a huge difference.
Huge difference.
And if we were the Soviet Union or Russia or Nazi Germany, you wouldn't say it was collectively owned by the people. You'd say it was owned by Russia.
Right.
Or it was owned by the Soviets, right?
Yep.
That land is owned by but when you live in a democratic system where we elect officials like that idiot Senator Mike Lee, we put him there. We voted for him. And now he's doing things that we don't like. So what happens in this government we have is we don't vote for that guy again.
Right.
We stick someone else in there who is on our side that's going to fight for what we want to have done. And therefore, it's not like the King of England.
Right.
These lands are not hoarded by somebody who gets to make all the choices. No, we elect people to complete. You can't equate our government and our system to that of socialist, Soviet Union or communist.
And their tactic is, let's just throw those things out there and force you to have to defend it, which defending, I'm done defending.
Yeah.
Okay? In about the last
I've kind of noticed that
4 months, I've decided time to go on the offense. Okay? The best defense is a good offense. And this is going to piss some people off, okay? But I'm in the I don't give a shit mode right now.
Yeah.
So until you inflict pain on the person who is hurting you, don't expect things to change. If you just sit there and say, I'm going to be like the goalie and I'm just going to kick the puck every time it comes my way, sooner or later they're going to score. There's some pucks are going to get through.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm grabbing that puck, I'm going down there, and I'm scoring on the other end. And if someone says something about it, I might bring the big guy over the boards and start thumping on some people.
I feel the same way when I was talking about Mike Lee. I'm like, let's call a spade a spade. He's a liar.
He's a liar.
He's a liar. There's no way you can take these historical facts and twist them like this and be anything but a liar.
Right.
Because I said this, I don't think he's an idiot.
No,
I think he's too smart to be an idiot. So what he is a liar. Because there's only two options. You're either an idiot or a liar.
Right.
And I'm like, you don't get where he's at because you're an idiot.
Yeah. And
so when you become a liar like that, I'm like, okay, now everything you do and everything you say is suspect. Why?
Right.
Why do you want to transfer these lands? Because you made the biggest, fattest lie possible about all these lands. You spun some revisionist history narrative that is so false, it blows my mind. And so I'm like, if you're that guy, then what are your real motives?
Right.
Because now I don't think you're just out there because you want the states to have the land so that they can manage them better, so the people will be better off. BS. If you're that guy, you wouldn't have lied like that.
Right. And, on TV, they can't say lie. They got to say, he's spreading falsehoods. Well, you know what? Where I grew up, that was called lying.
That's a lion.
And, when your circle of buddies, you're sitting there telling stories and whatever, and you're 15, you know who the liar is.
Yes.
You don't have to get to be 60 years old to sort out who's a liar.
No.
Those kind of people are liars. They're not spreading falsehoods. They're freaking liars, okay? Grandma would have washed my mouth out with soap, whooped my ass, made me mow the lawn and rake the leaves, and not fed me for 2 days if I would have lied like Mike Lee did.
And I got to tell you, knowing that someone's a liar, and it's group identity in a sense.
It's self-identification.
But to me, it's like, wait a minute, it's actually just the truth. Like I try to catch myself when I'm putting someone in a box like that. But it's boiled down to, I've done enough research to go, no, you're a liar.
Yeah.
And because of that, I may not have all my facts and figures or numbers exactly right when I'm talking about these issues, but I'm got them lined out enough to know that I need I need to put myself in the fight, even if I feel intimidated.
Yeah. So here's where people are going to get mad, because a lot of my listeners, like myself, I'm right of center on most issues. So what you have is people who say, well, but you can't trust them on this. You can't blah, blah, blah. I am done. This happened a long time ago. I am a party agnostic.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to belong to a party, I don't care, but I have no concern about parties.
Right.
When I got kicked out of the Republican Party here in Montana, in Bozeman, I used to go to the meetings, the local Republican meetings. I was one of these idealistic guys. I'm like, look, man, I'm
with the party.
Yeah, I'm a conservative guy. You know, I'd like lower taxes.
Yep.
I've got lots of guns. And after about a year and a half, the local leaders here threw me and another guy out. They said, we don't want you guys here anymore. All you guys want to talk about is public lands and access and hunting and fishing. And I left that. And at first I was kind of mad. It's like, man, what did I do? I'm no longer, I'm not welcome here.
Yeah.
And I turned that to, you know what? F that. You're better off without a party, Randy. If you want to be independent in your thought and in your thinking, get rid of anything related to a party. So I did. And so these two guys who threw me out, me and the other guy, out of the local Gallatin County party, we went and said, what's our strategy? We said, we're going to burn these guys. We use a little stronger language. Here's a full-page spread of Randy Newberg at his CPA office in the Bozeman Daily Chronicle. Me sitting there with all my decoys and everything in the background. Fellow Republicans about ready to go out. Something like, watch out, the hunters and anglers are going after these Republicans. And I don't care if it would have been Democrats that threw me out of their party.
Right.
I don't care. So it just so happens the fact pattern I'm discussing here happens to be Republicans. And it created a storm. The Republicans lost the control of the state legislature that election period.
Yeah.
And I still have the email from this guy. He's another CPA. He emailed me and said, I hope you like what you got. Because of you, this is what we're dealing with now. Cool. You've mistaken me for someone who gives a shit.
Yep.
And that was the first time I realized that a couple pissed off guys can make a big difference. And I wish we could take credit for flipping the state legislature that year. There's a whole bunch of other things that went into it. But we got blamed for it.
Yeah.
Because some very key seats ended up flipping over hunting, fishing, and public access. So that got me in this strategic mindset. And this gets back to I'm going on the offense. There's a standing invite to any political candidate in any, like in Montana, we have a Senate race this year. Incumbent John Tester, a Democrat, against Matt Rosendale, who is he right now holds an elected position with the state. He's the Republican candidate. Either of them, in fact, folks, if you guys are listening, both of your candidates have a public standing invite to come on this podcast.
Yeah.
Please do. And I'm going to engage myself in this stuff. And I don't care who it is. I don't care what party they are. I have pissed off enough Democrats and enough Republicans that it doesn't matter. And so going on the offensive is whichever candidate is going to be the strongest on hunting, fishing, public lands, public access, and conservation. That's who I'm going for. Because all the other things, if you want to talk about fiscal responsibility, whatever, guess what? They spend like drunken sailors no matter what party's in power.
Right.
So I sort out all these issues that make really no difference, that they're almost indistinguishable.
Right.
Other than in one instance, you got to look at Chuck Schumer talking about it. In the other instance, you got to listen to Mitch McConnell talking about it. Well, to me, they're like two of the same. So this year, I'm going on the offensive. And in Montana, the hunters and anglers and public land advocates can flip a Senate seat. We have the power to do that.
Absolutely. That's an email I get all the time.
What can I do?
What can I do? Because I vote Republican.
Yep.
But they're the ones out there, or that are, in their their goals in their charter is
Their party platform has a plank that says, get rid of these public lands.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, but you can go out there and look at it. Yeah.
So they're like, so the party platform is built for this, and that's something that they're running on and what they're doing,
Right.
and they're like, so do we vote Democrat? But then we lose our guns and all these other social issues, and
The people bring that up, and I get it all the time, Brian. It's like, how can you vote for blah, blah, blah? You know what? Right now, at least where I live, the Democrats and the Republicans are both good on guns. Where I live, they're both kind of the same on the size of government and taxation.
Yeah.
They're not the same on public lands, hunting and fishing and public access.
This is going to sound all hippy dippy, but I'm going to throw it out there.
Okay.
I feel like people who get outdoors and that experience the outdoors have a love for it.
Oh yeah.
The people who camp and fish and bike and hike and climb and get outside and are close to nature, they value it. And they may not agree with me on social issues like abortion or fiscal issues and
I
stuff
don't care.
like that.
That's fine.
But on that one area, I feel like people who get outdoors like that and experience it.
No, I know where you're going.
It's like their soul is a little like more. I just trust them a little bit more. If you are for animals and wild places, we can disagree on so many other things, and I think we're probably going to sort it out okay. in the end.
I agree 100%.
Does it sound too?
No, I know exactly what you're saying, and for my own self, I had to look in the mirror and say, all right, Randy, what are your freaking priorities? And even after I got tossed, if you want to call it that, or asked to no longer come to the Republican meetings, I still had this feeling of I was always voting for the Republican in a kind of a pinch. He got the benefit of the doubt, or she did, and I just had to keep self-assessing. What is my priority in life? Yes, my family, my friends, all that. I'd say no matter if you're on the far left, far right, or somewhere in between, your family and your friends are pretty high priorities. We don't have a lot of disagreement that those would be pretty high priority. We get down below that. What are the things that identify me, that are why I get up in the morning and do what I do, are what are important to me and my family? And it's these things, the hunting, the fishing, the public land, all the things I keep talking about. So which one of these candidates is gonna be who's gonna carry that cause for me? Because all the other bullshit that I worry about, none of them are probably gonna listen to me on that.
Right.
So what? And it gets back to this: when this ends up being painful. In this case, you pointed out the Republican Party are the ones who've come up with the crazy ideas. And that hurts a lot of people to have to admit that. But it's until we admit that and quit trying to rationalize it, we're never going to get them to stop these attacks.
Right.
And it's not like the Democrat. I don't think that Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi give a shit about public lands either.
Right.
By default, they've inherited, quote unquote, the mantle of public land.
Right.
Not because they understand
they fought for it or love it, or that they're even aware of it at a large scale.
I can assure you that at some point in time, they would sell my public lands down the river if one of their other issues came up.
Yeah.
So it's just how it is right now. They're not the ones who are attacking what I love.
But I agree. Yeah, exactly. I agree. I feel like, here's what I think. I have faith in human beings that love public lands. And want to see wild places stay intact and wild animals live in perpetuity. For all those still in the womb of time. I have faith in those people. They might disagree with me on a lot of other issues, but if they're in that place and that matters to them, I just feel like, okay, from that point on, we can figure things out. So yeah, I'm in that boat where I'm voting for people who have faith in public lands and faith in wild places and faith in wild animals, and that want to see those things survive. And if their heart's good there, I feel like we'll sort the rest of the things out.
Yeah.
But
back to your listeners, I get the same thing. Like even here at Total Archery Challenge, for the last 3 hours, I've been standing out in the sun. People have been like picking my brain. Hey, what can I do? I love what you're talking about. What can I do? So my goal in the next few months is to give people ideas of what you can do.
Yeah.
And what you can do is have a strategy, be active, go on the offensive. Because right now, we have not made the public land conservation issue painful enough to the Republicans to get them to drop it. And so here's what they've done. On a national level, they've said, here, Utah, Senator Lee, Senator Hatch, Congressman Bishop, all you crazies, we're going to give you the keys to the public lands of the West, but you're going to support us on immigration, on taxes, on blah, 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 blah. That's the deal that's been cut. So imagine if we could cost the Republican Party 3 Senate seats because we identified 3 candidates who were not strong enough on hunting, fishing, and public land.
Yeah.
The RNC and Washington, D.C. would get on the phone and say, hey, Mike Lee, guess what? You're done.
Yeah.
We are no longer letting you be the mouthpiece.
You have to make it painful enough.
You have to make it painful. And until we are willing to do that, we are going to continue to have to fight this same shit every day, every month, every year, and it's going to be the same argument.
Well, Randy, you know what pissed me off? What set me off with Mike Lee was I felt like we just did this with Chaffetz.
Yeah, I know.
With Jason Chaffetz. I thought, man, we all rallied, we all kicked butt, we all made this thing disappear, and it was like loud and clear. It hasn't been very long, and Mike Lee comes out with this crap?
Right. No,
I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay.
Right.
This is nowhere near over.
Right.
There's not a message been sent.
No.
And it's just getting started.
Right.
And so I feel like you have to get engaged.
Yeah.
Or it will be gone. But making it painful, making it painful enough, it means that you have to truly and genuinely love public land, love wild places, and love animals, and be honest about their future in 100 or 200 years if they're not here. Be unselfish because if they sold off all those lands, it's going to take a while. I'll probably be old by then.
Yeah.
I'll have had my fill. But it's not about me. It's about my kids and my grandkids and my great-grandkids. Yeah. I mean, so it's about other species on the planet besides human beings.
It requires all of us to get outside our comfort zone, to make it painful. If we're going to make this painful enough that the Republican Party pulls that out of their plank and tells the Mike Lees to shut up and start listening to, there's a Republican Senator, Richard Burr, from North Carolina, who is like the biggest public land advocate. He is in the Senate. He killed a Senate bill because they were going to take $16 million out of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and the bill died because a Republican said, F you.
Yeah.
You don't have to be like Mike Lee. You don't have to be like Ted Cruz and still be a Republican. You can be like Richard Burr.
Yes.
So the point of all this is, we just have to decide, our comforts of being a partisan animal, is that worth having to continue this fight, or are we sooner or later going to just say, you know what? It's kind of like when I rode a school bus 20 miles every day from 7th grade to 12th grade. And I got picked on, man. I mean, the older kids, finally about 9th grade, you're like, you know what? I got 4 more years of this, or I'm just going to have to go up to that big bastard and smack him right in the nose, and he's going to whoop my ass. But you know what? He's done picking on me. Yeah. And I did that, and he quit picking on me because it was painful. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of the same thing. I hate to break it down and make it that simple, but
it's scary. It is. You get to a point where, but you have to care. exist, right? Or it won't happen in the first place.
If you don't care enough, if you're not willing to put your biases aside and say, this is my priority and I'm going to take action and I'm going to act in the way that reflects what I say I'm all about, then it's never going to happen.
So what do you think about this? So there are many in the hunting, like peers, friends of ours, that we know or work with, and their stance on these issues is just as hands off, or often what I hear is, I would support TRCP or I would support like BHA, but they did this and then they did that, and so I can't help them.
Yeah, but that's because they're chicken shits. they're counterfeit chicken shits.
That's what I feel. I feel like it's a cop-out. It's like, okay, no one's going to... You don't have to agree with BHA 100%. Like you said to me offline, if I had to align myself with groups or people that agreed with me 100%, what, you'd be a party of one?
Yeah, I tell people I'd be a group of one, me.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember what level I am at the NRA. Like a benefactor, life member, endowment. I can't remember. Do I agree with everything they do? Hell no.
Yeah.
Do I agree with everything
That's
BHA
the other
does?
thing.
Hell no.
I did a podcast called Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death. I was pissed off about the Second Amendment deal that was going on.
Yeah.
Especially after, the Parkland shooting and things like that, and this walk for... Anyway, I was... And again, I lit the airways on fire with my opinion, and I got a lot of people who were just, quote unquote, disappointed in me.
Yeah.
But 95% of the people were like, thank you. I needed to know this, and I learned a lot, and I have a totally different view, or thank you, this needs to be said. I feel like it's all quiet on the Western Front. Like nobody's out there, and there's not very many people out there that are sticking their neck out. And when I do hear something like, I get it that you don't agree with, for example, backcountry hunters and anglers. Yeah. I get it that you don't like something that they did.
Right.
But we're never going to have it 100% perfect. But at the end of the day, I feel like, really, it's a cop-out, so you don't have to do anything.
That's exactly what it is. It is somebody rationalizing the discomfort that comes with having to look in the mirror and say, these are my priorities. And until people are comfortable and willing to do that, we're going to have the same it's going to be, my grandma used to say, when the same thing kept happening, she'd say, same shit, different assholes.
Yeah. Well, I would say, like, when you look at these issues, it's the same thing when you're voting for, I have people say, well, these aren't my public lands. They're not mine. People just do with them what they want. If they were mine, I would want them to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, are you engaged? Do you go and participate? Do you vote people in to do what you want to have done with your public lands? Do you advocate for, if you don't do anything, you can't say that our public lands aren't public. You can just say, I don't participate.
Right. I'm too busy, or I've bailed out, or I've ignored it. And so all of that is accumulation that the other side, it's an accumulation of the situation, of the realities we face that the other side uses to their advantage. They're good at offense.
Yeah.
They've got money, they've got connections, they've been organized, and this is a plan that's been underway for years and years and years and years. And they like the fact that all of us want to have a group that we agree with 100% of the time. This whole green decoy thing that hammers BHA. So this Will Coggin dude, I've never met him, but I've researched him. He's some dude from Northern Virginia, been running the campaign about the Montana green decoys. Well, when he first started it, he had me and a group I started included in there. And then I pointed out to some people, I'm like, really? Huh? And now,
Randy Newberg's a green decoy?
Yeah. So now the group I started, I helped co-found, called the Headwaters Fish and Game Association. Now we're no longer, evidently he's like, oh man, I'm kind of out of line here. So I'm no longer, quote unquote, included in that group. But the whole concept of it pisses me off because it's putting some sort of lily white absolutism perfection standard to one group and giving, and people are falling for it. Okay, the Green Decoy campaign supposedly says this funding, that source, whatever. You know where, I don't know where the funding is coming from the Green Decoy campaign, other than because they're a 501c4 that doesn't have to disclose their funding. I know who's in charge, Richard Berman, a lobbyist from D.C. I know who his mouthpiece is, Will Coggin, who's coming to, the Montana Guides and Outfitters are hosting him as a keynote speaker in August, the guy running the Green Decoy campaign. And that is evidence of how these people understand how to use us against ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we're willing to fall for it, you know, we're going to end up with what we deserve.
Yeah, I was talking to, I don't know, it was maybe 2 years ago. And I was in hunting camp with Ryan Callahan from First Light.
Yeah.
And there was a group of us, and we were having a discussion on these issues, right? And someone made a comment to the gist of, you know, well, this guy uses maybe a different clothing than this guy, and this guy does this, and this, and Callahan said, who cares? Like, if we can't get on the same page as it relates to, if we can't get on the same page as it relates to public lands, then I don't care if I piss you off.
Right.
Like, I don't care at that point if these things are difficult or if we argue. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, I really don't. And so imagine this. Imagine if in 2018, one Republican Senate seat on the national level flips because of public land and conservation issues. That would get a few people's attention, especially if it happened in a state where Donald Trump won by 20 or 15 points, and supposedly that Republican should have had a easy shoe-in. You know, how could he lose?
Right.
But he ends up losing because he's bad on public lands. And then think about in 2020, if they lose one or two more seats, and it costs them control of the Senate.
Yeah.
And they come back and they do the autopsy, and they say, you know what? Mike Lee and Ted Cruz and their stupid-ass opinions, the Mountain States Legal Foundation, all these groups that are continually throwing money at the process, all this, well, I call it the Utah doctrine. No offense to you who live there. I mean, so many great people live in Utah. I still scratch my head on how they end up with their elected officials. But imagine if the Utah doctrine cost the Republican Party 3 Senate seats and they lost control of the Senate. Someone's going to get on the phone, the Republican Party, the folks at the NRA who are worried about gun control issues, they're going to get on the phone and say, you know what? We are junking the Utah doctrine. That's the only way this is going to change.
The thing is, Randy, is there could be a little more help within the entire hunting community, more unification.
There should be.
More of us like working together with this. And I'm encouraged, you know, when I went to BHA 4 or 5 years ago, it was like a few hundred of us.
Right.
You know, and I've been the last few times and it's just packed. And I remember going the first time going, there's not very many people from the hunting industry in here that I follow on social media and so forth. And now they're there. They're regular faces. So, and then you look at the Chaffetz thing and I was blown away by the overwhelming support through social media, the sway and the push that we had. You know, it was great to see Cameron Haynes go and actually sit down with Jason Chaffetz and actually have a conversation face to face. Those are things that wouldn't have happened years ago. Yeah. And so there is a unified voice coming out. And there are things I really like TRCP, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Project. Partnership. Yep. I always get it mixed up. It's no offense, guys. I can use the acronym, but I can never remember it.
I'm the same way.
And those guys, though, they could put out really good informational content that I use to redistribute to my audience, where I learn things from that. And BHA does a great job and keep it public. And I try to. I feel like that we are getting more unified and that voice is getting stronger. I just think there's still so far to go.
Well, it's so far to go. And anybody listening to this who has influence, has platforms, has whatever, they probably are too busy to listen to anything Newberg has to say. But if you are not taking an interest in the public land issue, you're asleep at the switch. And I don't care if you live in Florida, if you live in Michigan, Texas, Montana, Utah, because when we're already a small portion of society, and you take a large number of us where 70% of us hunt on public land, if you remove that, this thing we call hunting, this thing we call hunter-funded conservation is down the tubes within one generation. And why people somehow want to pretend that that's not reality, is only because they don't like the discomfort that comes with accepting that reality. There's no other way around.
Yeah, when reading Wilderness Warrior about Theodore Roosevelt, the things he did were bold.
Yeah.
And stepped on toes and pissed people off.
Yeah.
And without someone like that, without him doing what he did, we wouldn't have these lands today.
We wouldn't.
We wouldn't have the animals.
And we are so blessed with what we have today. And I think one of the things where we've fallen down is we've not told the stories of how this happened, how we got here. And we're sitting right here in Big Sky, Montana. The next valley over to the east is what's called the Paradise Valley. The Yellowstone River starts up in Yellowstone Park, comes through Gardner, goes to Livingston, goes through Billings all the way out, joins the Missouri River in Fairview, North Dakota. Or Fairview, Montana, right at the North Dakota border. And in 1970, late 70s, when the Arab oil embargo, the OPEC oil embargo happened, there was this big rush for American energy independence. And never wanting to miss an opportunity of crisis, a group of people came to Montana and said, we're going to dam the Yellowstone River just south of Livingston, Montana.
Make a big reservoir.
Big reservoir. We're going to flood it all the way up to Emigrant, Montana. And we're going to divert and dewater the Yellowstone River for a series of coal-fired generating plants that by the time the Yellowstone got to Billings, Montana, it would almost be dry. And it was on the fast track in the name of energy independence. A guy named Jim Posowitz worked for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. He lives in Helena, Montana right now. And Jim ran the division. I think it was called Environmental Services Division.
Yeah.
And he knew this was a train wreck for wildlife, for migration corridors of all those animals that used the Paradise Valley, for all the fish, all the farmers downstream. This was a train wreck of the highest degree.
For wild animals.
For wild animals, for local communities that had found a way.
But we would have energy independence.
There you go. That was the crisis used to dam and dewater the Yellowstone River. In 1978.
But Randy, to think that way, you have to devalue wildlife.
Exactly.
You have to not see its value.
Right. And not the wildlife, the landscape, the space, the habitat they need. You put that at a lower priority.
Yeah, you have to see cash, money, income, power as more valuable.
Exactly.
You just discount all the rest.
Right. So many people today drive that beautiful drive from Livingston, Montana to Gardner, Montana. There's a reason it is aptly named the Paradise Valley.
Yeah.
But if you drive that, or if you float the Yellowstone River in that stretch, try to envision that being a reservoir under 100 feet of water. If you've ever driven the Yellowstone from Livingston to Big Timber to Columbus to Billings, try to think about dozens of coal-fired generating plants there dewatering the river as it goes, as it goes, as it goes. And the reason I'm saying this is we take for granted that it was always that way. And yes, it was always that way, but because a guy like Jim Posowitz and his crew of people at the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Bruce Raywinkle, a whole bunch of them, they fought that. I mean, imagine all the powers of the energy industry, the Montana Copper Company, which used to own Montana politics. All of them saw this as like the next big opportunity.
Next big thing.
Here's a little handful of guys at a state agency who said, no, our task, our job is that we are going to protect the wildlife and the habitat of Montana. And no, we're going to fight this dam. And they enlisted the power of a Kentucky bourbon brewer or distiller and the power of Life magazine. And they got it killed. And now the Yellowstone River remains the largest undammed river in the lower 48. Jim Poswitz, his department got completely dismantled. He got stuffed to some other department of supposed important work, but Jim paid a serious political price for that. But because of Jim Poswitz and his group of people, the Yellowstone River is not dammed, it's not diverted, and it's not dewatered. And there are stories like that every place we go. We're in Big Sky, Montana. Big, beautiful ski resort right here.
Yeah.
Right east of here, Highway 191 comes through Gallatin Canyon, is a place called the Porcupine Game Range. It winters about 1,000 elk. There was slotted to be a highway to go up over that as a shortcut to Yellowstone Park and to almost develop it into like Big Sky East. In the early 1950s, an employee from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks got wind of it and without approval comes down and signs a buy-sell with the landowner to tie that land up. He got fired. But he got his job back. And Montana, through hunters' license dollars, ended up buying that land that was slated to be how many elk would be right here in this
Right, right.
Somebody who had a concern about wild things in wild places and had their priorities set straight, stuck their neck out and did something. And the list of these stories is every place we go that has public lands has these stories. And every one of them have these same key 3 ingredients, and I talk about it all the time. If you're going to fight and advocate for conservation, it's never easy. You're always going to feel like it's the David and Goliath. It's never convenient. We don't get to pick when and where the threats come from or when and where the opportunities will arise. We're always going to be way busier than we want to be.
Yeah.
And everyone along the way that's got us here, they were always busy. They had kids and jobs and the whole thing. And this is the last part is probably the most important part. It's always uncomfortable. When you stand and speak for wild places and wild things, someone is going to make it uncomfortable for you. It might be your sibling, it might be your parents, it might be your coworkers, it might be your best friend. They're going to disagree with part of your opinion. They're going to say you're a loudmouth. They're going to say you're siding with a bunch of hippies, a bunch of greenies, a bunch of gun lovers, or whatever they might say. You have to accept if you're going to make a difference advocating for public lands, wild things, wild places, it's going to be uncomfortable. And if you can't stand that, the odds are you're probably going to not stand and be counted. And someday down the road, we're going to get what we deserve.
That's the part I don't want.
Yeah.
I don't want to get to that point where you look at what we have today and it's spectacular.
Amazing.
The envy of the world.
The world, for sure.
And the idea of losing that because we're asleep at the wheel, because we take it for granted.
It ain't happening on my watch. I say cold dead hands about it.
Yeah.
For me, it is cold dead hands, man. I'd go in the dirt before I'm going to stand there and watch this huge, amazing public estate of conservation that is the core of. There's one place in the world that is still the shining example, in spite of all of its shortcomings and warts. The shining example of conservation is still in the United States. And Absolutely. At the core of it is this public land system, public lands, public waters. That's what keeps it going. And without it, what really are we as Americans? What are we as an America?
No, and I was talking to Leon Tani from BHA, and when we get unified, it's powerful.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it makes a difference. When we go and talk to our elected representatives, and as a group, as a community, we say, yeah, this isn't going to fly, or we can't get behind this. This is wrong. It's powerful, and organizations like BHA help us get unified.
Yeah.
You may not agree with everything, but when this Mike Lee thing happened, they've built the network. They've built the teams. They could send out, okay, we're going to rally here. We're going to do this. We're going to be unified here. We're going to approach this. We're all going to sign these postcards, and we're going to hand deliver them to Mike Lee. When they help us become, these organizations, they help us become unified and act.
Right.
And if you don't like some of the things that happens in the organization, then join the organization and start changing some of that stuff.
Right.
Start being engaged and having a voice. I at the same time, Randy, this last year we moved from Colorado to Utah, and things have been really hectic, and I wasn't engaged as much as I'd like to be, and I understand people have life that comes up.
And that's what the other side takes advantage of.
And I think, though, that with organizations that are out there that are at our disposal, platforms, groups, people that you can reach out to, I think we can stay engaged, but we don't have to carry the bulk of the load all the time.
No.
Someone else can carry it for a while, then we can come in and carry more, and someone else can carry it and we can carry more. But I think it's important that we're all unified in that regard, that we all come under the same roof and be like, okay, on this issue, we're on the same page. And when it comes to states, these transfers from public to state, one of the things I get a lot from people is like, okay, I get that the states might sell it.
Yep.
But what if they don't?
Yeah.
And I do the math and I do all this other stuff, and it doesn't work.
It doesn't. So let's just walk through that example. And people have heard it on this podcast a lot of times. Because I get the same thing you just said, Brian, that you're getting is, well, how can it be wrong if it's in the state's hands? Mm-hmm. All right. Let's use where you used to live, Colorado.
Yeah.
It's 23 million acres of Forest Service and BLM land. That under that state land law, whoever leases it controls access, controls everything. So you take 23 million acres and you give it to a state land board that has a completely different set of rules, where now it's not open to just anybody to go and hunt and fish and camp and hike and shoot like it currently is. So in effect, we're losing access to 23 million acres if state transfer happens in Colorado.
Right.
So even if they don't sell it,
you still lose access. Not only that, if you're not from the state of Colorado, you lose ownership.
Right.
Why would you just give up your ownership?
Yeah. I'm not.
But I do get emails from people saying, "Why should I care? I'm from Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And I come to Colorado every year, and they charge me way more as a non-resident than they charge residents to hunt my public lands.
Right.
And then I have to explain that your lands are yours. They're public, and you're not getting charged to access them, but the wildlife is owned by the state.
Exactly.
And the state is what's screwing you. And then they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, the state's screwing you. So you can only imagine if they screw you as a non-resident with tag fees so you can shoot their wildlife. Right. How bad are they going to screw you when they get to own the land and they say, yeah, you're also going to pay this trespass fee because you're not a resident in Colorado.
Right. Or you're not going to get to hunt it because you're not a resident like Wyoming.
Exactly. But you just can't hunt it at all unless you have a guide
in a wilderness area.
Pay some exorbitant fee.
Who thinks that states have cornered the market on good policy and good management hasn't looked very far.
Right. It just sounds good when the politicians are spinning.
Right. And I get it. No one, if you're going to write a book about proper land management, you wouldn't go grab the BLM and Forest Service operating manuals.
Yeah.
None of these agencies are perfect. But for anyone who thinks that the states are some altruistic idea of perfection, has no idea how it operates, at least in these Western states. So, are you running late, Brian? Am I holding you?
I don't think so.
Because I'm about ready to wrap this up. Anyhow, I don't need to sit here and get people too much more wound up.
I enjoyed it. I've been wanting to talk to you about a few things. Like I said earlier, I had a bunch of emails and people, a lot of pushback on different things, but mostly, it's 95% is very positive. And from my position, I want to awaken in people an awareness and for the treasure that we have in these wild places. I want them, even if they don't experience them for themselves and they never leave their desk in their office, I want them to realize and value it and then start voting for things based on just knowing that it's there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get these emails that piss me off where someone writes in and says, well, I'm too poor. I'm never going to go hunt there anyway, so why should I care? Or the state charges me too much money. And I'm like, you selfish bastard. Like, it's not about you. Like, why are we making it always about, it's like, well, I don't get enough out of it, so I'm out.
Right.
Like, that's not a way to live your life, dude.
No, that is not how we got to where we are to enjoy it. And I don't care if you're talking about public lands, all the great American institutions were because someone was thinking about the next generation and the next generation. And if we are collectively, and hunting is a cross-section of the American society, if we're going to adopt this, it's all about me, what's in it for me, we can kiss our asses goodbye in another generation or two.
No, and I don't think there's any kind of road to happiness, or fulfillment when you're like, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
And I don't, I think it goes back to, if you care about wild animals and wild places, that's not a narrative you tell yourself.
Yeah.
You don't sit there and go, if you genuinely care about the fish in the Yellowstone and the bears here and the elk and the deer, if you genuinely care about that, you're not sitting there going, well, what's in it for me?
Right.
It's just not in you.
No.
And so maybe, you ought to think about, yourself and what you really care about, what you really value, because that should be a red flag.
Yeah. No, it's just great to have these discussions because I want people who are sticking their neck out like you are to know that there are people who appreciate it. And I'm not saying about me, I appreciate it, but I've got listeners who they love that Brian says, if you guys want to get mad at me, knock yourself out, but this is kind of where the bear shits in the buckwheat here.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what we need more of in the hunting world is leadership about these issues. Leadership that you don't have to be all one or all the other. I mean, I'm like the biggest dichotomy there is. Mm-hmm. I'm an avid supporter of BHA and I'm an avid supporter of the NRA.
Right.
I'm an avid supporter of the ACLU. I think my First Amendment rights are just as important as my Second Amendment rights. And people look at me like, dude, you got issues, man.
Yeah.
And my friends who are very big First Amendment advocates, they just can't understand my Second Amendment passion.
Yeah.
And the same as my Second Amendment friends can't understand why I'm not giving up my rights to speech and assembly and blah, blah, all my First Amendment rights. So I say that because we as hunters feel that we got to be pigeonholed, that we got to be A or B, that it's binary. No.
Yeah,
we can
and
be whatever we want to be.
I never noticed that so much until, the last couple of years where I have listeners and friends who say, I'm Republican. Yeah. So unfortunately, I have no choice. I've got to vote Republican. I wish they would change their stance. And I'm like, they're not going to change it unless you make it hurt.
Exactly.
And so in that regard, I may not agree on some of these other issues, but I don't know. I don't mind the fight. It's part of making it hurt, Yeah, it's what's got to be done, and as long the other side is waiting for us to get down on our knees
and say, please leave us alone. Please leave our public lands alone. Oh, you please, what do we got to do? Please quit picking on me. Nah.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Let's go over here and grab some clubs and start beating the hell out of some people.
Well, it's been fun, like with the Senator Mike Lee thing. It's been great to see so many people rally, come to the BHA after party, support it, get involved. There are a lot of people who said, I don't really know anything about this. I just know that you're not a fan of it, and so I'm here to learn.
Yeah, they're trusting you.
And I think that that's a great step. Like, we all start learning together, and then. But I agree. I think there's room for a lot more involvement across the board. And and I said this a long time ago. You got to make conservation cool.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think you're right there.
And I think it is. I think it is cool. I think that, and the more people learn about their history, our history, and the reality of the world we live in regards to conservation, the more they'll just do it, because it's not a lack of desire, it's a lack of understanding.
Right. And a lack of us giving them the opportunities and the channels to do it. So before I ask people where they can contact you, I need to clarify, when I said grab clubs and start thumping people, I'm talking metaphorically here. So I don't want some Secret Service person or some security agent to come up and throw me in the clink or something. But
what's been the most rewarding relationship that you have had since you got involved in the hunting world? Business-wise, person-wise, company you've worked with, individual?
I'd probably break that into categories. I think person-wise is just the thousands of people who they say, thanks for saying what I'd like to say, or thanks for having the time and investing your energy in defending things that I don't have the time to do, or the whatever.
Yeah.
So my wife, she puts up with so much. She's such a wonderful person. And we don't make any money at this operation, but what makes her day is when we get an email, because she handles most of my emails, that says, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thanks for this, or thanks for that. And that, to me, the relationships with just the average people who I've been blessed in my life. I'm in a position, both in the time of my life and my age and my career and financially, with, you get to a point, no mortgage payment, no car payment, none of this. You can go out and do what you really want to do. And I have that blessing in my life. As long as I have health, I'm going to be able to go and wake up every day and say, I love doing this.
Yeah.
And I understand that not everybody else is in that situation at that time in their life, at whatever, but I am. And so I don't view this as like a burden on me. This is like what I want to do. Yeah. I love doing this. So I'm all excited about it. And if other people say, hey man, thanks for doing it, that part of the I guess when you ask what relationships I value, that has been like as cool as it gets. As far as companies and stuff like that, I've had the same group of sponsors since Moby Dick was a minnow. I mean, and they have supported me, and they get a ton of blistering emails about me.
Yeah.
Because I've got a big mouth.
Yeah.
And every one of them say, Randy, get out there. Keep doing it. I mean, we're sitting right under here, under the Leupold booth. Across from us is Sitka. All of these companies are like, without people like you and Brian and others out doing this, our businesses don't have a future. So to surround myself and have my platforms financially supported by companies that get it, when I started this idea 10 years ago, 2008, I was taking this nebulous, intangible thing called public land hunting and trying to create a message and a brand and a following about it.
Yeah.
People thought I had lost my frickin' mind, and I had. I'm here to tell you there was a lot of insanity there. But to see the companies that were at the time thinking the same way, and said, "Yeah, we're in."
Yeah.
I mean, that has been so cool.
Well, one of I've been involved with Leupold for a little over a year. And one of the reasons that I'm super patriotic, American.
I know, you're wearing a Leupold flag on your shirt.
I'm very much all-American. I just like, it's important to me. American made, important to me, things like that. And Leupold is that all-American company.
Yeah.
But when I talked to my wife about working with Leupold, because we talk about these things together, and I was like, well, they have supported and have been with Randy Newberg forever. And they support, and I just got off of watching Uncharted, like with Jim Shockey.
Yeah.
All those scenes, the whole series, binge watching.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're standing for those. You guys are old, but
Jim and I will take that as
you and Jim are old, but you guys are not afraid to stand up for conservation.
Yeah.
And that right there, when you have a company that backs that, it was easy to begin that relationship, and it's what I wanted. It's what I want, what I value in a partner, you know. And so but again, I mean, a lot of it was their support of you that opened the door.
Really?
And so,
well,
appreciate.
They've been good to me. If people knew how much they support conservation, they don't like to talk about
Yeah.
it. Like, if people get a chance, there's two things that I hope they go and look at. We did a public land film.
Yeah.
We premiered it at BHA, but now it's out on our Amazon channel. It's called Uncommon Ground.
Yeah.
Leupold sent us out there to try capture the essence of the backcountry experience and why that connects us to public lands the way it does. So selfish promotion, selfless, whatever you want to call it, somewhere in between that spectrum. Go out to our Amazon channel or our YouTube channel, either of them, and watch Uncommon Ground, and you'll see the kind of message that Leupold is telling us to go and do. And
that's right there is, I was telling you offline, you know, Mountain Ops has been a big partner of mine. We were friends before. I mean, they were there when I started my first podcast where I recorded it. I'm like, who are you guys and what's this Mountain Ops thing? Because Casey was running the camera behind the podcast for me. I'm like, hey dude, can you run this camera? He's like, sure. I had no idea who he was. So he's recording it and he's got the hat on, and finally I'm like, I should probably mention the guy behind the camera. What's your name? Casey? And I'm like, what's this whole Mountain Ops thing? And he's like, well, we just have some supplements for outdoors and stuff. But those guys have been a huge supporter of me from the start. And partners like that, you know, it's important to me that the partners I have are willing to become political.
all right. Because
That they're willing to fight for the things that are important to them, their values. And if they don't have values, if they're like this partner that's sort of like apolitical, I'm like, well, then what are you standing for?
Right.
Why are we doing anything if you're just neutral?
Yeah.
I don't need neutral. I need fighters. I need people. I need companies who are going to stand behind what we're doing. And that's the direction that I started going down as I learned more and more about these issues and the things I care about. And besides that, they got some cool stuff. In fact, they have a really cool product that I dropped off a cliff that belonged to Randy Newberg. Sorry about that, Randy.
Yeah.
So
I was prototyping a pair of binoculars that I loaned to Brian, and he dropped them off a cliff from, I have no idea.
Is the Coatimundi got me the better of me? It's in my blood.
So he brought them back, and they
resembled a baby rattler.
I know.
Like
I know, but prototypes are built to
prototype.
Yeah, it's a prototype. Yep. They're not meant for multi-story
Rita told me we hand glued
off.
those to prototype test.
Yeah.
And I feel guilty. I feel guilty.
I've got some more prototypes coming, but you don't get to touch them, Brian. I'm keeping
Which
them all
makes
to
total
myself.
sense.
But I said, I said, there's 2 things I want you to watch.
Yeah.
I talked about the Uncommon Ground film.
Uncommon Ground film.
And I forgot the other thing. That comes with old age. The ability to just flat out forget something within about 1 second is an acquired trait. You don't get to that point until you get really old.
Yeah.
So maybe by tomorrow, I will remember what it was that second thing, so that when I'm doing a podcast tomorrow, I can remember to bring it up.
I'm one of those guys that forgets it, doesn't forget, but interrupts the people in the middle of their thoughts. So sorry about that.
No, you and my wife kind of like on the same wavelength there.
We're just trying to remind you of how old you are.
I know. I am like older than Methuselah's
Oh, look, Randy.
grandmother. What do we got?
Did you forget what you were saying?
Yeah. See, Brian, come on. That's not even fair. We're sitting here. There's hundreds of people walking by, and Brian is pointing at people, and I cannot multitask. Okay.
Yeah.
My wife can multitask.
Yeah.
I can't.
I knew all right. What was distracting me is Sean DeGray over here that runs the archery challenge.
Yeah.
Dancing to this old timer butt rock.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What? How far back do you go for old timer butt rock?
I would say, the 90s, late 80s, 90s.
Really?
Oh, I mean.
So like CCR, Creedence Clearwater.
That's ancient butt rock. That's ancient rock and roll.
Like Kansas, Dust in the Wind.
Yeah, I'm thinking more like what we got back here, Guns N' Roses.
I wouldn't know Guns N' Roses. I was already married, having a kid by the time these dudes came
Every
along.
Rose Has Its Thorns? Classic.
Never heard of it. Never heard of it. So like, what would you like, something like REO Speedwagon?
Oh.
Like that's like that. That's like
solid. Is that your generation?
Meatloaf.
I mean, REO Speedwagon, they had some hits.
Yeah, they did. Mm-hmm. So did Meatloaf. But I'm just
through the door.
Yeah, I'm just kind of telling you where what you call old butt rock to me is not. It's like
not old enough.
Yeah, that stuff.
Yeah.
What year did you graduate high school?
93.
Okay.
I'm 40. I'll be 44 in October.
Okay.
So I'm getting there.
I'll be 54 in November.
My dad is just a few years older than you.
Yeah. My mom is just a few years older than me.
How's that?
I was not planned. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I wasn't either. My parents were young. Were your parents young?
16 young?
Yeah, mine too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's kind of cool when you...
It was cool having young parents.
Yeah, when you go into the whatever place and someone is like talking to my mom and what's your younger brother want?
When I was in high school, my buddies were like, dude, your mom's hot. Because, you're 16, she's what, 32, 33?
Yeah.
I mean, it just... it was cool having young parents.
Yeah.
Definitely informed who I am today. Mm-hmm. I'm sure.
Yeah.
It worked our butts off.
Yeah.
It worked us. We didn't get Saturdays my parents were young and they wanted mansions in the woods, and we were doing landscape and yard work and setting up patios and decks and chopping wood. Why couldn't we have just had electric heat? My parents, we chopped wood, I swear, my entire childhood.
Yeah.
Was just cutting wood.
Have you not heard my lectures about this whole idea of heating your house with wood?
Oh, I have, yes.
Yeah.
We and you are on the same page.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who thinks that having a chainsaw is a good idea is not an elk hunter.
Dude, my dad loves chopping wood just to chop wood.
Right. How many elk has he killed?
Like... one.
Right. There you go. There's your answer. Right. So my buddy, I live south of Bozeman. Every September, it's like clockwork. I'll get up early. I'll go out elk hunting. I come back, and there is, I'm going to use a different name. There's Pete out there on the firewood pile with the wife and kids, going at it.
Yeah.
And I get up the next morning, I go elk hunting. I come back, and there's Pete and the kids out there, and they're running the log splitter.
Oh, I don't get it.
And then the next weekend I show up, he's got another load of wood there. I'm like, Pete, you don't live here because you want to cut wood every weekend.
No,
you want to go elk hunting.
We would go kind of hunting, but it was just to go get wood. And it's, oh, there's a nice log there. And then we'd end up chopping wood and loading that up and driving it home.
My dad did the same thing. He wasn't all there. My dad went to his grave, never killed an elk. So
my dad does love to hunt. He does. But
not if he likes to chop wood.
He does like to chop wood.
No, you cannot have a passion for cutting wood and be a serious elk hunter.
I do remember like watching my dad chop wood and thinking it was like a work of art, though.
Yeah.
Like the way he wielded the axe and the chains, he's chopping wood sideways, one-handed, chucking a log here. I was like, that man's way into this chopping wood thing.
I mean, he's got skills, no doubt.
Yeah.
But I don't want those skills.
I don't want them either.
I mean, if I got skills, I want skills that kill elk.
I'm the oldest of 8 kids, and then I got 6 sisters. And so it was me and a bunch of girls. So no offense to them, but they're not moving as much wood as I am.
Right.
And they're not carrying as much logs. And my dad was the type that was like, he'd just throw you a big giant piece of wood and you're supposed to catch it and then put it in the pile. He's 20 feet away.
Yeah.
And you're like, and if you don't get rid of that one and put it in the pile, that next one's hitting you. It's coming.
Yeah.
And my sisters would just take it. Boom, boom, boom. I was a little like fitter, you know.
Yeah.
But sometimes he'd get whirling away and it was rough. A little rough.
Well, anyone listening to this podcast, if you own a chainsaw and a wood stove,
get rid of it.
The number one cause of divorce for marriages that have lasted longer than 10 years is home improvement honeydew projects.
Makes total sense to me.
Like putting up wood, fixing chainsaws, cleaning the flue out from the wood stove. Get rid of that stuff.
Yeah.
Jeez, pay the man. I mean, that right there, that is so contrary to Adam Smith's theories about economics, right?
It is.
Adam Smith is you find what you are good at, and you pay someone else to do what they are good at.
No, that wasn't my dad at all.
You are never going to be
My dad still isn't that way.
Yeah. You're never going to be good at putting up firewood in September and calling elk. Those are contradictory
Mutually exclusive.
activities. Right. You have to pick one or the other.
I could see that.
Yeah. It is how it is. So, but
Randy?
Yeah.
You know this song, right? Bon Jovi?
Who?
Living on a Prayer? We're halfway there. Whoa. Living on a prayer.
Nah.
We'll make it, I swear.
Who is it? I grew up listening to old Hank Williams Sr. and Lefty Frizzell, and George Jones was just a beginner.
You did grow up in sort of a weird place in the world.
I did.
I was in the Oregon forest, in the middle of the woods, but we didn't have a lot of money.
Neither did we. We lived in a trailer house.
We lived in a tent for a year.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Then we lived in my dad's Volkswagen bus, my parents' van, because the tent started to leak a lot because we were in the Northwest and it rained like crazy. Remember the floor was like a mud puddle? And my mom was fed up and we started sleeping in the van.
Yeah.
Because it was dry. Yeah. And then my dad worked graveyard shift at he's a truck driver.
Okay.
And so we'd get in bed, like the sun was going down, we'd climb in bed like 8 o'clock or whatever. We'd fall asleep, and then you'd feel the car start up, and then he'd drive it down to Savi's Island in Portland and park in the parking lot.
Wow.
And then he would go and drive truck all day and come back just as the sun was coming up. And that's about when we were waking up. And then he'd start the car, and he would drive it home, and then we'd get ready and go to school.
Drive it home. Where was home if you're living in a tent?
We were we sort of abandoned the tent for a while and just, stayed in the van for a little bit. They were clearing land and putting in roads and getting ready to put in houses. And in that interim period, they didn't have any place to live. And they're like, we're just going to camp it. Young parents do things like that.
So I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable place, Brian, but as you were saying this, that your parents were young and you're the oldest of 8 and you're sleeping in a van together. I'm like, where do the other 8 come from in those tight quarters?
Well,
I mean, it's none of my business, but I'm sure I'm not the only person who heard you say that. It was like,
at the time there was only 4 or 5, I think, when we had the van.
Still, how do you? If you're
they were young parents. No, my parents, they had 3 right away. Boom, 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 just like that.
All right.
I couldn't figure out birth control.
All right. I mean, there's just some parts of that just don't.
You were trying to do the math?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, though, you would really like my parents.
Yeah?
They're awesome people. Yeah, someday you got to meet them.
Yeah, I'd love to.
They're about your age.
I was going to say, they're my age, right? They listen to the same music that I do.
They like you.
So, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. Because
my mom does. My dad's busy chopping wood.
Right. Well, if he does listen to me, he's going to say, you know what, that guy, I should get him out here to the woodshed and I'll straighten him out. Him. Yeah. No, I had the chance to be a logger, and I was the worst logger in the world. And
you just gave it up, right?
My brother doesn't. And he shot 1 cow elk in his life. Because
it's hard to believe your brothers.
He's always out there in the woods, not hunting. If you go to the woods, you bring a rifle or a bow. I've given up on my brother. I love the guy to death. He's a great guy. He's 7 years younger. You know, you would hope there was like this older brother mentor thing going on. He's like the anti-Randy. He will call me up just to push a button and tick me off about something.
It's interesting how...
That's just how he is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a brother thing.
My dad is just a worker.
Yeah.
He's just one of those people that from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to bed, he's got to be working.
Really? He's not a go-getter?
I mean, he is. I mean...
No. My grandma had a term for the guy across the street. Oh. She would say, and I'm going to use a fake name here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, old Dick, he's a go-getter. I'm like, he doesn't work much. She'd say it again. Yeah, he's a real go-getter. I'm like, really? He's a go-getter? Yeah, he takes Leona to work in the morning at 4 o'clock. He'll go get her. So in my family, when you said someone's a go-getter, it meant that they're a lazy.
Opposite.
Lazy ass. They take their wife to work and then go get her.
Yeah, no, my dad's tough. Always has been. Works hard. Hard-working dude. I admire my dad. I admire my mom. Yeah. They're both incredible people. Yeah. You grow up, though, and you realize, man, they're messed up.
But everybody thinks their parents are messed up.
But then you realize, everyone's human.
Yeah.
And when you really boil it down and you sit back and you look, you realize how, at least for me, in the case of my parents, you realize how remarkable they are.
Yeah.
In spite of the fact that they're as messed up as the rest of us. I mean, they got a lot of issues. But man,
everyone does.
I admire my parents.
People are like, man, you're really close to your mom. I'm like, all right, imagine this. I'm the oldest of 3. Mm-hmm. My parents get divorced when I'm 10 or 11. My mom, until she gets remarried later, raises the 3 of us.
Single parent?
Single parent. And in 1975, getting divorced was not common. You were like, you may as well put a big stamp on the kids' foreheads. Hey, his parents are divorced. Don't touch him.
Right.
So she raised the 3 of us until she got remarried, strictly on what she could make as a waitress in a little country diner. And that gets back to, at that time in my life, everything I wanted to do was to be a hunter. Mm-hmm. Everyone in my community was a hunter. Even though my dad was a drunk, he still liked hunting. The only time we had even the slightest sanity to a father-son relationship was in hunting season when he'd sober up a little. So the whole issue of that divorce has formed my life and my perspectives of why I'm sitting here right now. And a lot of people are like, why is that? Because if it wasn't for public land right out my back door, my absolute dream of everything I had dreamed of was to be a hunter would not have happened, because my mom, I would have said, Mom, it costs $1 today to hunt this private land. And she would have tried to be strong and say, Randy, I don't have a dime a day for you to go hunting. And she would have went in the next room and bawled her eyes out.
Yeah.
But because I had public land out my back door, I got to be a hunter.
You're rich. You're rich.
We lived in a frickin' trailer house. We lived in the most rundown, crappy. My mom kept it beautiful as well as she could. My dad was kind of out of the picture. My dad came to Montana to make his fortunes. He kind of blew out of the picture for a couple of years. In that period of time, my sanity, my trying to put some semblance of a life back together happened when I was fishing down on the river banks of the Big Fork River, or when I was out with my 22 or my 410 hunting rabbits or grouse or whatever. And that has connected me to public lands and hunting in a way that I can't think of any other life experience that would have made me the advocate, the committed person to these things that I am.
Yeah, I mean, Theodore Roosevelt talks about how every American should experience public lands, and he believed that they were what made him the man he was, as president, and that those lands were what got him through times of hardship when he lost his wife, and he lost his mother the same time. Those being able to go out to the wilderness and then just unplug was life-changing for him.
Yeah. For me, when the world gets crazy and doesn't make sense, the place where it still makes sense is when I'm out.
Why do you think that is? I have my theories, but
I have no idea. I'm not smart enough to think that hard, Brian. I just know that when I go for a hike, I'm so blessed to live in a place. I got a trailhead a mile from my house. And I can burn a 2-hour hike up, get to the divide, turn around. And by the time I get back to my car, my truck at the trailhead, I am just like...
different.
Yeah. The world makes sense again.
I heard, I read from the book, Land of the Spotted Eagle with Luther Standing Bear, and he talks about how the Braves and the Lakotas, they would give away their possessions and and they would just give it all away, and they were encouraged to, and the more they could give away, you were left with nothing but your own strength in the end. And that was looked upon as positive and something. And I think about that, I'm like, man, as people today, when you give it all away, or when you don't have that much possessions, you're not acquiring all this weight. When you go out in the wilderness, you're stripping yourself of all of those things that you kind of encase yourself in civilization. You strip it all away, and you go out in the wilderness, and you realize you're not hot shit in a champagne bottle. You're a cold turd in a Dixie cup. Like, you're just a person out in the wilderness, and you realize that at the end of the day, you're going to die just like everybody else.
Right.
So the things that matter all of a sudden become clear to me, and those things are nature, wild relationships, family, loved ones, things that, might sound cliche, but the sort of things you can take with you when you die. And so I think that's why it's restorative. That's one of my theories.
That might be it. I don't know what it is, but if I leave the office and I go for a hike, I'm like so much better. And just about every day that I'm out hunting, fishing, hiking, whatever, my mind goes back to those times when the context of that was, it was a very troubling time. There was trouble waiting for Randy Newberg around every corner.
Yeah.
And I didn't find it because I had some guidance of aunts and uncles and grandparents that was remarkable. But whenever it got rough, I could go down along the river and I'd build these little fires. I'd make a little hobo dinner, man. I thought I was really living big. I would go do whatever. And it was probably where I felt freedom and relief from the pressures of a society that looked at me and my family differently than maybe they looked at other people. And no one cared. The animals, the wild places, they weren't judging me.
Yeah.
It was just, I'm here.
Well, I think there's a resurgence. I have a lot of friends who've never hunted or done that sort of thing. I grew up doing the same thing that you're describing as a young boy. Like, we had acreage for as far as you could want to explore, and we did.
Yeah.
And we grew up, we'd catch crawdads and boil them down by the river and eat them, and we would, climb cliffs and trees and build forts, and that's just what we did. And so I have that appreciation, for the outdoors. But I'm finding a lot of people at my age now discovering it for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's exciting too.
That is. I wish, I don't care how old they are. I'd love it when people find, and I don't care if it's a hike in a park. I don't care if it's camping in a
I think it was you
campground.
that said, you feel like if you could just get some of the senators and these congressmen, some of these elected officials to come out and hunt with you and experience an elk screaming in their face at, point blank range and go out and live off this land and in this land and experience it, that they would experience a totally different feeling. And I think it's true. I think there's a disconnect from the land.
To that point where there's a standing offer to any senator, any secretary of this, secretary of that, if they want to come on a public land elk hunt with me, I will clear my calendar. And so, folks, if you want to pass that along to your elected officials, I can't think of anything that would convince people how important these places are to so many of us than if they spent 5 days sitting around hunting elk, coming to camp, sitting at a campfire. They would realize, you know what, this is some serious stuff to these people. So that's an open invitation to anybody who wants to take it. I'll foot the bill. I'll pay the cost, whatever. I don't care who it is. But, Brian, I've kept you longer than I was supposed to.
Yeah.
I know your wife is going to say, that guy that big mouth got tangled up with another big mouth.
That's right.
And where is he? But
that's okay. I can see my ride is standing right there. So.
Oh, really? Okay. So where can people find Brian Call and the Gritty Bowman?
You can find the Gritty podcast on iTunes.
Yep.
Or anywhere, Spotify, anywhere you're looking for a podcast. We have a YouTube channel, Gritty Bowman, and we have our website, Gritty Bowman. And cool thing coming out, I'm launching like 6-8 weeks of video, like 3 videos a week for a couple of months.
Wow.
And I've recorded a lot of video over the years, but never compiled it. I just didn't have the time or the bandwidth. And now I've got it over the last couple of months, and it's all ready to go. So I'm excited to share that. And one of the reasons I like producing video content of hunts is because of this thing we're discussing, getting people, inspired to go and experience and have these adventures for themselves.
Yeah.
And when they see you just be real and raw and just kind of go out and, miss a Coatimundi, in bold fashion, they're like, oh, I could do that, and I think it does. And you eat it, and they see that, and it's just this whole thing that reconnects them to nature. It's a huge driver for all the content that I want to produce. Is that to get people back in touch with nature?
Yeah.
Because I think that right there is what actually takes them to the next step, which is giving back to nature.
Yeah.
Making sure it's here for generations to come. So
I agree.
that's where they can find me.
All
Instagram.
Right. Well, I'm going to leave them with this, that nothing's going to change if we don't change.
Yeah.
And understand that the public lands of America are the greatest concentration, the most valuable accumulation of undistributed wealth in the world. And therefore, a lot of people want to get their hands on it. And if we don't do something about it, they may succeed.
They may. If hunters don't get unified, they will succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they are not going to win, Brian Call.
Cold dead hands,
you heard
baby.
it right here. They're going to get an ass kicking from here to the ocean.
Yes.
In the next 4 or 5 years. I hope everybody listening, if nothing came of this podcast, I hope they say, you know what? Yeah, it's time to go on the offense. And let's do that.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you, Brian.
Appreciate it.
Take care. Thanks for listening, folks.